I want you to try a little thought experiment with me for a second.
Okay, I'm game.
So imagine you're standing right in the middle of a loud, modern, just bustling city. You know the exact kind I'm talking about, right?
Oh, for sure. Lots of traffic, noise everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. You got that deafening roar of cars. You've got these massive, towering concrete skyscrapers just, scraping the clouds. Glaring digital billboards flashing at you on every single corner.
Just a whirl of pure, unrelenting forward momentum.
Right. Concrete, glass, steel. And this is the experiment. What if you're only looking at the surface? Like, what if, right beneath that thick layer of asphalt you're standing on, there lies a perfectly silent, unimaginably beautiful, and incredibly advanced older world?
It's a pretty profound, almost dizzying premise when you really stop to think about it.
It totally is.
The idea that the physical reality we navigate every single day is, well, merely a facade constructed over something entirely different.
And the documents we're diving into today suggest exactly that. They propose that the modern world we experience might just be this new layer, built deliberately over the ruins of a glorious, completely forgotten global civilization.
A civilization known to the people who supposedly lived in it as Tartaria.
Yes. Welcome to today's deep dive, where our mission is to really unpack one of the most intriguing, viral, and honestly radically alternative historical narratives of our time.
It's definitely making waves online right now.
Big time. Now, to be crystal clear right out of the gate here, our goal today is not to declare this theory as absolute truth or, to put on a tinfoil hat and tell you everything is a lie.
Right, we're not taking sides here.
Exactly. Instead, we're going to impartially examine the ideas presented in our source material, unpack exactly how this narrative boldly challenges our traditional view of history, and explore, why this story is captivating the imaginations of millions of ordinary people online.
Which I think is the most productive way to approach this. I mean, this exploration is really about opening a door to new questions, rather than trying to definitively close a case.
Well said.
The core theme running through the material we've gathered is this stark, really unsettling friction between the history we are taught in school and the anomalies that might, hypothetically, be hiding in plain sight around us. It asks you to consider what happens when the narrative we've universally accepted as fact is challenged by physical evidence that simply doesn't fit the timeline.
Right. And to even begin to understand how a massive, highly advanced civilization could just be, collectively erased from human memory, we will first have to take a hard look at how we view time itself.
Because the Tartaria theory really just completely dismantles our default setting.
It totally does. We all grew up with this very linear view of history. The assumption is that, human progress is this steady upward climb from cavemen to the digital age.
A straight line of progress.
Exactly. But the documents we're analyzing today argue that history isn't a straight line at all. It's layered.
Layered, right.
It posits this idea of cyclical resets, that the past isn't an organic progression of events, but a timeline that has been intentionally reordered, edited, and manipulated by an invisible hand.
Proponents of this idea love to point to that famous quote, history is a lie agreed upon, written by the victors.
And that brings us directly to the concept of the New World Order within the specific context of this theory.
Right, which we need to clarify.
Yes, because this isn't necessarily used in the modern political sense that you might hear on the evening news today.
Yeah.
The theory frames it more as a historical force of complete erasure.
Okay, walk us through that.
So when this new power structure takes over, they don't just do the standard conqueror stuff.
Like raising taxes and changing flags.
Exactly. They don't just install new local governments, draw new borders on a map, or change the currency. They fundamentally change the baseline truth that people are allowed to remember.
Yeah. It's an exercise in total narrative control. The logic is, if you control the information pipelines, the educational institutions, and the physical architecture of society, you can slowly orchestrate a collective generational amnesia.
Okay, let's unpack this mechanism, because this is where my brain starts to kind of stall out a bit.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. To me, it's like moving into a fully furnished, high-tech smart home, ripping out all the electrical panels, replacing them with literal wax candles, and then telling your kids you built the house yourself from scratch with a hammer and nails.
That's actually a really great analogy.
But how does a whole society just accept the candlelight without noticing the massive solar panels on the roof? Like, how do you convince billions of people to just forget a masterpiece?
Well, according to the sources, you have to look at the mechanics of information control during the time period when this erasure supposedly happened.
Which would be when?
Mostly the mid to late 19th century, the 1800s. The theory points out that if you centralize the printing presses, standardize the newly formed public education systems, and control the major academic institutions during that specific window, you control the boundaries of reality.
So just bottleneck the information.
Precisely. If the handful of people writing the textbooks simply omit an entire chapter of history, the next generation never learns it. To them, it literally never existed.
Okay, so if this grand timeline was entirely painted over by a new ruling class, how in the world are modern people suddenly spotting the original brushstrokes?
Because they are spotting them.
Yeah, people are finding what the theory calls cracks in the wall of history. And we aren't talking about, massive Indiana Jones-style archaeological digs uncovering lost golden cities in the jungle.
No, the anomalies that brought Tartaria back into the spotlight are actually hidden right in front of us.
The Lost Empire is entirely in the details, or rather, in the documentation that kind of just slipped through the cracks of this big reset.
For instance, researchers in this space point to old physical maps.
Oh, the maps are fascinating.
They really are. Maps from the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries that clearly show a massive empire labeled Tartaria stretching all the way across the northern hemisphere.
Like from the Ural Mountains in Asia right over to North America.
Exactly. And the documents mention their distinct flag, too, which features a griffin, that mythical creature that's half eagle, half lion.
Right. But the piece of evidence that really made me stop and just reread the text a few times was the 1771 Encyclopedia Britannica.
Ah, yes, the encyclopedia entry.
I mean, this is a highly respected foundational text of the Western world. And according to our research, the 1771 edition explicitly recorded Tartary as a vast country in northern Asia covering over 3 million square miles.
And just to put that into perspective for you, 3 million square miles is roughly the size of the contiguous United States.
That is huge.
It's an absolutely staggering amount of land.
Okay, hold on. Devil's advocate here, because here's where I have to push back on the logistics of this.
Go for it.
We aren't talking about a secret handwritten diary found in a dusty attic, right? We're talking about a 3 million square mile empire officially listed in the Encyclopedia Britannica. In the 1800s, we had independent map makers, massive global trade routes, thousands of local newspapers. How do you orchestrate a cover-up that massive without someone leaking it? How do you just misplace a landmass the size of America?
That is the exact friction point that makes the theory so polarizing, but also so engaging to unpack.
Right.
The proponents of the Tartaria theory argue that the 19th century was a period of massive, chaotic upheaval precisely because this cover-up was taking place.
Oh, so the chaos was the cover.
Exactly. The argument is that the history we attribute to the 1800s, the rapid colonization, the massive global wars, the sudden industrialization, was actually the New World Order systematically dismantling the old grid.
Wow.
So when people today stumble upon these encyclopedia entries or these old maps, it shatters the illusion of that flawless linear timeline we talked about.
It definitely prompts a destabilizing realization. I mean, if an empire of that magnitude was acknowledged just a few hundred years ago and then entirely vanished from our modern curriculum, you have to ask yourself, what else has been edited out?
And to truly comprehend why a new ruling power would go to the extreme, almost incomprehensible lengths of erasing a society of that size, we have to look at what made this civilization so radically different.
And by extension, why they were potentially so threatening to the new system.
Right.
The narrative outlines what it calls the old world order of the Tartarians. And let me tell you, it paints a picture that is wildly different from the empires we usually learn about in school, like the Romans or the Mongols.
Yes, they're not described as ruthless conquerors bent on violent global domination. The alternative narrative frames them as a deeply interconnected, highly advanced civilization.
The word utopia gets thrown around a lot in these documents.
It does.
Their core philosophy was supposedly built on perfect equilibrium. The rule was, if you take from nature, you must return more than you took.
Which sounds lovely.
It does. But it wasn't just a quaint agrarian lifestyle where everyone is, churning their own butter and living in wooden huts. The technology they supposedly possessed is genuinely mind-blowing.
This is where it gets really sci-fi.
Yeah. The theory claims they harvested free electromagnetic energy directly from the atmosphere, a boundless power source they called aether.
And this is where we really need to dive into the mechanics of the theory, because it doesn't just say they had magic. It actually offers a pseudoscientific explanation for how this ether technology functioned.
Okay, lay it on us.
So the theory suggests that the majestic, incredibly ornate buildings we see worldwide, the ones with the intricate metal spires, the massive copper domes, and the complex geometric layouts.
Like the really grand, classical-looking stuff.
Exactly. The theory says they weren't built that way just for aesthetic beauty.
Right. The theory claims these grand structures were actually a global network of power stations.
Spot on. The idea is that these buildings function as gigantic atmospheric antennas. They were designed to draw static electricity right out of the air.
That's wild.
Because the higher you go into the atmosphere, the greater the electrical potential. So those intricate metal spires acted as conductive points, pulling the ambient electrical charge down through the copper domes and the iron frameworks of the buildings.
So they were literally pulling power from the sky.
Yes, funneling it down through the building's geometry to power their cities without a single wire, completely silently and cleanly.
And it goes even further than just, keeping the lights on. The research details how they supposedly used massive pipe organs, the principles of sacred geometry, and specific sound waves, a field known as cymatics, to physically heal people.
Sound healing.
Yeah, they use sound and vibration as medicine. If you've ever seen those YouTube experiments where they put sand on a metal plate, and then they play a certain sound frequency, and the sand forms these perfect, complex geometric patterns.
That's cymatics.
Exactly. The theory suggests the Tartarians built their entire cities to resonate with these healing frequencies.
And the physical footprint of this is allegedly still visible today in what we call star forts.
Oh, I've seen pictures of these.
If you look at aerial photos of places like Fort Bretagne in the Netherlands or Goryokaku in Japan, they are massive, perfectly symmetrical, star-shaped complexes.
And standard history says they were just military fortifications.
Right, designed to maximize cannon fire angles. But the Tartaria theory argues that their shapes perfectly match those cymatic resonance patterns.
Wow.
They were energy hubs, vibrating at specific frequencies to distribute ether and promote harmony across the land.
Okay, wait, hold on. If they had free energy, advanced sound healing, zero-emission atmospheric power, and this perfect global harmony, they should be virtually invincible.
You would think so.
Right. Like, how does a society like that just get wiped out by guys with muskets, steam engines, and horse-drawn carriages? That makes zero sense to me.
Well, an empire of that scale and sophistication definitely doesn't just quietly fade away because someone invented a slightly better rifle.
No way.
The erasure of Tartaria, according to the narrative, required an event of apocalyptic proportions, a coordinated cataclysm.
And the documents point to a specific, potentially engineered global event known within the theory as the mud flood.
The mud flood?
Yeah, and this is one of the most fascinating pillars of the whole movement. Because the evidence for the mud flood, the theory asks you to just walk around any major historic city, Seattle, Paris, New York, London, and look at the oldest buildings.
Just use your own eyes.
Exactly. Many of them possess half-buried ground floors. You'll see windows at street level that look directly into a basement, or massive doors that have been bricked up halfway, or architectural features that have absolutely no logical purpose if the street level was always where it is today.
The mechanical implication here is that a massive deluge of mud and earth physically swallowed the lower levels of the Tartarian civilization.
So the first floors of their grand buildings literally became our basements.
Exactly, but the text hints at something even more sinister than just a natural disaster, like a flood or an earthquake.
Right, it mentions weapons.
It does. It mentions the possible use of high-tech destruction, directed energy weapons, or DDBUs to intentionally liquefy the earth and wipe out the civilization's infrastructure.
That is terrifying.
And once the dust, or rather the mud, settled, the New World Order swooped in. They essentially moved into the ruins, changed the locks, and claimed the surviving majestic architecture as their own European creations.
Just slapped a new label on it.
They took those atmospheric power plants, ripped out the ether harvesting tech, and conveniently converted them into government buildings, post offices, churches, and museums.
It is the ultimate act of historical identity theft.
It really is.
I want to pause here, actually, because this ties into another massive piece of the Tartaria puzzle that perfectly illustrates this idea of a repurposed world. And that's the 1800s World Fairs.
Oh, yes. The World Fairs are a crucial pillar of this theory.
Like the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893 in Chicago, the 1904 St. Louis Fair, the 1915 San Francisco Fair. The official historical narrative tells us that these massive, sprawling, breathtakingly gorgeous neoclassical cities were built in just a few months.
Supposedly out of temporary plaster and hemp.
Right, just to host a fair for a few months. And then, once the fair was over, they just demolished them or let them burn down.
Which does sound a bit strange when you say it out loud.
The Tartaria theory says this is completely absurd. You don't build a flawless, continent-sized Rome in a matter of months with horse and buggy technology just to throw a party.
No, you don't.
The theory argues these fairs were actually the unearthing of ancient Tartarian capital cities. The new rulers supposedly painted them white, held a massive fair to show the surviving population the new narrative, and then deliberately burned the evidence to the ground to hide the past.
It's an incredibly compelling visual argument. I mean, when you look at the photographs of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the scale and the grandeur genuinely boggle the modern mind.
It looks like ancient Rome.
It does. Which brings us to an important psychological insight here. Why does this specific vision of the past resonate so deeply today with ordinary people?
That's a great question.
I think it taps into a very real feeling of alienation with our modern built environment. We live in an era of cheap, brutalist concrete, endless strip malls, and purely functional, uninspiring architecture.
Lots of gray boxes.
Exactly. We've largely stopped building grand, ornate public works. So when we look at 19th century architecture, it looks so alien, so disproportionately magnificent compared to our modern capabilities, that we assume it must have been built by a lost magical civilization.
That makes total sense.
The Tartaria theory thrives because it validates our modern exhaustion. It represents the tragic loss of a beautiful, sustainable blueprint for life.
It's like we're mourning a future we could have had.
Precisely.
But, the architecture wasn't even the most disturbing part of the takeover. I really want to focus on what I found to be the most chilling detail in the entire source material.
The human element.
Yeah. It talks about the people who actually survived the mud flood. It's one thing to steal a building and change a city's name on a map, but the research mentions children being systematically separated from their parents and put on what were called orphan trains.
A very real, very dark part of history.
Right. Between 1854 and 1929 in the United States, hundreds of thousands of children were relocated. The theory recontextualizes this real historical event as a deliberate cultural reset. They were shipped off as slave labor, specifically to cut off their bloodlines. Doesn't that turn this from a quirky architectural mystery into a really dark, systemic cultural lobotomy?
Cultural lobotomy is exactly the right phrase for it. This is where the narrative shifts from a mysterious internet puzzle about old buildings to something profoundly tragic. The orphan trains explain the precise mechanics of how a civilization is completely erased from the memory of future generations. If you want to delete a society, you can't just knock down their buildings.
You have to erase the people.
You have to literally sever the human link to the past. By taking the children, isolating them, and forcing them into labor under a new paradigm, you create a generation of blank slates.
Wow.
You ensure that the stories, the language, and the philosophy of Tartaria die with the older generation. The children grow up only knowing the reality the New World Order constructs for them.
They grow up looking at the fresh paint, completely unaware of the stolen masterpiece underneath.
Exactly.
It is incredibly dark, but logically, within the framework of the theory, it is the only way a cover-up of this magnitude could actually work.
Yeah.
It creates a complete reboot of human memory.
And whether you view this as literal historical fact or just an elaborate modern allegorical fiction, it effectively forces us to confront how fragile our grasp on the past truly is.
Totally.
It makes you realize how entirely dependent we are on the institutions that curate our history for us.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive. Whether Tartaria is a literal historical truth waiting to be fully uncovered, or just a deeply compelling internet narrative born of modern anxieties, the concept successfully functions as a powerful tool.
It's a lens to view the world through.
It does exactly what we promised at the beginning. It opens doors. It forces you to stop the autopilot, to look at the old buildings in your own city with fresh eyes, to check old maps, and most importantly, to dare to question the neat, linear narratives handed down by the victors. I mean, think about it for a second. How often do you walk past a massive, ornate stone building in your downtown area, maybe a post office or a bank, with those giant columns and domed roofs, glance at the little brass historical plaque near the door, and just blindly accept the story you're told about who built it and why?
We do it every day.
How often do you assume the world has always looked exactly the way you were told it looked?
It's a question that lingers, isn't it? And if we take the core premise of the Tartaria theory, this idea of cultural replacement and architectural repurposing, and apply it forward into our own future, it leaves us with a rather haunting thought experiment.
Oh, I like where this is going.
If our modern civilization were to be suddenly wiped out by a mud flood today and a new world order took over tomorrow, what everyday structures of ours would they inherit?
That's a crazy thought.
What would they repurpose our massive windowless server farms, our colossal concrete sports stadiums, or our towering steel cell towers into? And more importantly, what elaborate lies would they tell future generations about what we use them for?
Wow. Imagine future historians pointing at a decaying football stadium and convincing everyone it was an ancient temple built for worshiping the sun god. Or looking at a Silicon Valley server farm and calling it a tomb.
It's entirely possible.
It really makes you wonder what else is buried under the concrete we walk on every day. Well, until next time, keep your eyes open, look a little closer at the buildings around you, and never stop questioning the narrative.